I brought along the design engineer for the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, Dan Zielinski, and he's kind of going to. Can you guys hear everything? Okay. Sure. So Union Street Dam, so this is the lowermost barrier, right? The three upper barriers were going to be removed as part of the project. This one was going to be modified. Modified because it provides a barrier for sea lamprey. So there wouldn't be the ability to remove it without affecting fisheries in the Great Lakes. So I'll let Dan kind of handle this. There was a selection process. You can talk about that too, how we actually selected the Boardman River. But Dan Zielinski, I'll back up 1 second. The feasibility study for this component of the project incorporated a trap and transfer facility. So upper dam is removed, the barrier stays in place, the fish that were selected to move upstream, the way they would move upstream was they would be corralled into some container, put in a truck, driven upstream, and put back in the river. It's not exactly our definition of connectivity. So while the team continued efforts through the project, we had our hands full, Brownbridge, Boardman, and Sabin. We always knew that something else had to be done here. So through the grace of many of those relationships and collaborations, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission came in, was looking for a place for this, what we're calling the Fish Pass project, and the Boardman River was selected for that project. And I'll just turn, Dan Zielinski is the computation engineer for the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. He's based out of the Hammond Bay office on the other side of the state. The Fishery Commission is a binational organization that was created under treaty in 1954 between the Canadian and the U.S. government.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So I'm just going to turn it over to Dan, and if you want to bounce anything back and forth, that's great too. Dan Zielinski, thanks.
All
so
right.
he drove across the state to be here with you today.
Yeah, so as Frank said, my name is Dan Zielinski. I'm an engineer working with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. Prior to my position at the commission, I worked at the University of Minnesota in the Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center. So although I'm an engineer, my background is working on ways to manage invasive species, primarily common carp and Asian carp. And now I'm switching over to sea lamprey with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. So as Frank said, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission is a treaty organization with Canada and the U.S., and they're tasked with management of the sea lamprey, invasive sea lamprey in the Great Lakes, as well as maintaining the fisheries within the Great Lakes. And one of the main management components for sea lamprey control in the Great Lakes are barriers. So barriers stop sea lamprey from accessing spawning habitat upstream, and then in conjunction with that, we also use chemical treatments to kill their larvae, so they can't go back out and infest in the lake. So between the lampricide treatments and barriers, those are the two main control mechanisms for sea lamprey. Now, because these mostly low head barriers also inhibit the movement of native species in and out of these tributaries, there's a lot of concern with being able to reconnect a lot of these systems while not allowing sea lamprey access upstream to start that whole process over again. So there was a real drive at the commission to start to find answers for ways that we can selectively pass native fish while still blocking sea lamprey. And Frank said there was a selection process prior to my time that looked at several different river systems within the Great Lakes to look at what site might be the best place to be able to develop an experimental facility to start to try and answer these questions. And through a fairly lengthy process, I think there was 12 total systems that were looked at. A lot were in somewhat more remote locations, but this one was chosen for a couple of reasons. One is it fit within the implementation team's overall goal for the Boardman River. So you had all this great work being done upstream, but you still had the lowermost barrier that's still an effective sea lamprey barrier, but there's a desire to increase native fish movement. And another reason why is this is in a very public location. You can tell downtown Traverse City, and that's one of the things that you really need with this type of project is build up a lot of that community support and public interest so that you can continue generating that public concern for invasive species control as well as fish passage. And although you may have heard that this is kind of a unique in the world situation, and it is for what we're trying to do, but slight variance on it can be seen across the world. Just last week I was in Corvallis, Oregon for a international fish passage conference, and we brought together a lot of other people from around the world that are starting to look at these same issues. And just a couple quick examples here just to show how widely important this is, and it's not just a Traverse City or just a Michigan issue. We had folks from the Netherlands that were looking at trying to increase passage of fish around all their extensive dike systems. Another one was in Brazil. You have a lot of hydropower interests going in on the Amazon River and its tributaries, so they're starting to look at how can they start to pass fish in those systems. But in that case, you don't necessarily want to pass all the species, because now you're introducing them into a deep reservoir, which is not their natural habitat. So you have those at two different continents. Germany also has a large fish passage research component, and now we're starting to build up our capacity in the Great Lakes. So that's kind of how this fits in globally. So the process that we've gone into this project has been trying to bring in as many collaborations as possible. So we have brought in about 60 scientists, engineers, local stakeholders, agency representatives to find out what's the best facility that we can build here and have the most flexibility to test and find out what's the optimal configuration of technologies and techniques to be able to selectively pass fish. So the kind of unique part about this is the fact that the Great Lakes Fishing Commission has funded over 50 years of research into trying to stop sea lamprey movement, and then around the world you have decades of research going into how do you increase passage of desired fish. So what we're trying to do here is have a facility that's flexible enough to be able to integrate all those technologies in different forms, which hasn't really been done to date. So that's kind of the goal of what we're trying to do here. So what we've done is we've set up a series of workshops with all these scientists and engineers and stakeholders to be able to come up, well, how do we want to manage this project? How are we going to build it? What's it going to look like? What are the things we can test here that you can't test at a normal field site or in the lab? This is kind of that critical step where you're taking all this research from the lab and moving it to a field scale. That's a real key component to any type of implementation for fish passage, and that's what we aim to do here. We had our first workshop in Windsor, Canada, Windsor, Ontario, late last year. And that was our first chance to be able to kind of create teams to be able to, kind of pick off parts of this project that we can kind of start to move forward. So we have a project management team, an assessment team, and their goal is really to start looking at, well, what do we have for fish movement below the dam as well as upstream of the dam, and how can we set up a sampling system to be able to look at what kind of impacts we can make with changes at the facility. Then we have our largest group, which is our behavioral ecology and design integration team, and this is the combination of scientists and engineers trying to come up with, what's the facility actually going to look like and what's it capable of and what can be tested. And then our last group is our outreach and education group, which is looking at ways that we can actually transfer this information then to the public, as well as kind of inspire the next generation of engineers or biologists. And Frank is a key member of our project management group and has helped us along quite a bit, so I do want to thank him for that. One of the key concerns here is that we want to be able to have a facility where we can test a lot of different technologies and techniques, but not necessarily let uncontrolled releases of sea lamprey upstream or any other fish that isn't deemed desirable upstream of the dam based on its current configuration. So that kind of goes into the design options that we've looked at. And for this last meeting, that was our key goal, was to look at 4 different alternative designs for the facility, and then pick out which one is our preferred design that we can move forward for full engineering design, as well as get public input on it and start moving it forward so we can get ready for construction.
I want to chime in here real quick.
Yep.
So right now what exists here, there's a fish ladder here. This fish ladder was built so that the anadromous fish could move through the system. So Sabin, the next dam upstream, you would just buy it at the conservation district, basically is the last bastion. And so that's the last block for those fish that can jump. These anadromous fish did not develop in this part of the this part of the world. They a fish that moves basically up from the sea into a river system and then back out. So the reproduction, they reproduce, spawn in a stream, and then they move typically back out. Except salmon don't exactly complete that cycle. But let's say that the definition would be that the fish that actually procreate in the stream and habitate in a lake. Steelhead, they'll move both ways, right? They don't actually. The salmon usually go up and die at the end of their life cycle. But in general, the point I was getting at is that these fish, east or west coast, evolved in places that they had to jump to access those streams. The fish that evolved within the Great Lakes, because the Great Lakes was contained by Niagara Falls and the Welland Canal, and that basically was a closed system in the Great Lakes, never evolved where they needed to jump. So those fish, the native fish, don't have the ability to use this. They don't. That goes to our behavioral team. They may be able to jump, but they don't even know that they should because they didn't have to evolve to jump. Really, that's what it comes down to, you know. So anyway, I just wanted to say we have a fish ladder here. Salmon and steelhead are the only fish that actually can move through it. The way it's managed right now at the weir, they put grates in sometime in August when those salmon start moving in. The DNR remove those fish, strip the eggs, and sell the fish for whatever purposes. High quality fish may wind up food grade, otherwise they wind up being some sort of fertilizer, dog food, cat food, those things, sure. And then the steelhead are passed on, so they'll move up through this ladder and up the system. I just wanted to touch on the fish ladder before we got any farther, so just go ahead. Are we talking about the native question, or the ones that actually are using the fish ladder are basically salmon and steelhead? The native fish in general, lake trout, walleye, sturgeon, brook trout, sucker, white sucker. Yeah, we could go on and on here, yeah. But those are the main fish you could say. Yeah. Sorry, back to you.
Yeah, and along those same lines, one of the first steps that you can take and is used at a few barriers within the Great Lakes is a seasonal operated barrier, because sea lamprey only move at key parts of the year. Generally, I guess it would be kind of late April and May, with their spawning time usually kind of running down at this time of year. It's all dependent on what the temperatures are in the river, but what's difficult is the fact that the time that they're moving upriver usually overlaps with a large component of when our native species are also moving. So if you only operate a seasonally operated barrier to stop sea lamprey, you're excluding a lot of your native fish as well. So that's one of the aspects that we want to look at for this site, is looking at that timing issue, acknowledging that that's not the only solution. I should probably talk about, before we go into the design, some of the things that we're looking at as options for control here is there's been a lot of research on controlling sea lamprey using pheromones or chemicals that they release that they use to basically communicate with each other, so they know, and that's how sea lamprey actually find spawning habitat, is the larvae release these chemicals that move downstream of the river. The adults will, because the sea lamprey are basically a giant nose, they can smell that way out in the lake. They can locate that tributary and move upstream to find that habitat, which already is sustaining larvae, so that's how they find that spawning habitat. And that's been one area of research that the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission has been looking into, to be able to exploit that to direct them towards traps or away from, or using different chemical cues to direct them away from areas where there is potentially good spawning habitat. Another one is using water velocity, so increasing the speed of the water in the river to a point where sea lamprey can't swim upstream. This is termed as a velocity barrier, and that can be useful in some cases because sea lamprey aren't necessarily all that strong as swimmers in comparison to some of the native fish, but then there's some overlap there as well. And other ones are you can use sound to be able to guide fish in certain directions. You can use light, electricity. There's a lot of different techniques you can use that can guide fish in one way or the other. And what we're aiming for is how can we combine those in a way that you can sort fish, similar to like a single stream recycling operation where you have a mixture of different materials passing through different processes that can pick out specific materials based on their attributes. So that you'd have magnetic, shape, size, color, all those types of things. That's the kind of approach we want to take here. So the design process that we went through to be able to set up a facility that's flexible enough to work with any number of the native fish as well as the invasive ones that we're dealing with, and all those different technologies and whatever form that may take, we need to be as flexible as possible. So the two main components that our facility will have is one is an experimental channel. This is something where we're just creating a very symmetric foundation, very basic, that can be easily manipulated by researchers to find out, test different technologies in different configurations. You could put in a faux stream channel within this experimental channel, but still have this upstream barrier so you're not releasing fish unintentionally, so you have a lot of control. And the other aspect is we still need to be able to pass the flow that's coming through the river so we don't flood everything upstream, so we have to have a kind of another bypass or spillway that provides the discharge capacity you need in the river, but also doesn't allow unintended releases of fish. So those are the two main components. And our last workshop, which was just held at the beginning of the month, we had all 50 or 60 participants looking at these 4 different designs and weighing out the positives and negatives of each one, and then selecting our top design. And I brought some images here of what our preferred design is. And there are some modifications we need to make to it yet, but I'll be able to show you so you can see kind of what I'm talking about here. So I'll start off with our general rendering. So you can see here, this photo is kind of taken from the perspective of the top of that condo. Looking down, you can kind of see, so we've got, there's a church back there, which is right here. Just kind of place yourself spatially, and then you have the Union Street Bridge, which is that bridge right down there. So the two main components are we have this bypass spillway to pass the flood flows, and that going into a nature-like channel. This provides a potential area for testing different technologies if we need to in a natural setting, but also this also provides easy access for canoes and kayaks to be able to just do a short portage and on into the river moving downstream. This other component here is the experimental channel. So this is the fully manipulatable experimental channel that we can do those tests in. Right now it's sized so it's about 30 feet wide and 400 feet long, so it's quite large. It has a lot of potential for different, really imaginative research going on. And you can see we have a control system on the upstream end so that we can manage flows within this, but also preventing sea lamprey or any unintended releases upstream. And then I can show you kind of a aerial view of the same setting here. And I can pass these around if you want to take a look at it a little bit closer. So again, this is the same design. You have the spillway on the south bank, basically right where we're sitting right now, and then the experimental channel on the north bank. One of the unique features of this design is this labyrinth weir. This was selected because it's a very efficient engineered structure. So it has all these different cycles, and you may have seen these because they're different styles of labyrinth weirs are used throughout a lot of the Midwest and in other water control structures. But basically you get all this additional surface area to pass water over in a fairly compressed footprint, which is really key for a site like this where space is at a premium.
Yeah, how much narrower is that channel than this channel, the bypass channel?
Well, the difference is this is kind of an unnaturally wide section of the river because of what the mill facility used to be here and the dam. But the new kind of bypass channel will be between 30 and 40 feet wide, and the experiment channel, again, being about 30 feet wide.
And are you guys involved in the bank stabilization and revegetation portions of the project?
Upstream? Oh, here, so the role of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, we're leading the kind of design phase, but we are now bringing on a architecture and engineering firm to be able to do the full engineering design of all this. So basically everything between Union Street and the Cass Street Bridge is included as part of this project. So that's all reestablishing a new river channel leading up to that spillway, as well as the experimental channel.
Let me comment on that a little bit too.
Yep.
We are in an urban environment, and because we're in that urban environment, it allows you to maybe use some techniques you wouldn't use if you were more rural environment.
Yeah.
In a rural environment, you might have a river channel that was 5 times as wide, and think about all the, not only the design costs for doing something there, but think about, even though we are in tight confines, there's opportunities with those tight confines because you have all the pieces that come with it. A neighboring city that cares about that infrastructure, the people that use it, the people are going to kayak it, the people that want to come down and walk across it. And then when you think about that bank erosion and planting, we're really talking about something that's going to be an urban facility that maybe doesn't have as many natural features as you would see not in an urban facility. So you're going to have hard banks. This isn't supposed to mimic anything particularly natural, even though there are there's certainly aesthetics are taken into account. Think about this as being a totally different mindset, different colored glasses than everything else we've been doing. Everything we're doing upstream is trying to mimic that natural, that kind of natural flow regime and the aesthetics. This is a little different situation. Think of this as a lab.
Yep.
We're looking at the experimental channel. Does it look like
Yeah, so basically it's a variation on the typical experimental flume that you'd see in a hydraulics or fish research lab. It's a relatively flat channel, and it has a very simplistic shape simply because that gives us a lot of flexibility in what we can do inside of it. So it's kind of oversized for that manner. But on the upstream end, what we have in this structure here is there will be a series of water control gates, so we can manage the amount of water that's going downstream, but also what that differential is between your headwater and the water level in the channel. So we can do experiments that have some level of fish being able to potentially access on their own by jumping over just a short barrier, or from manual scooping and seeing what made it through the gauntlet of technologies that are downstream. So it's meant to have as much kind of hands-on control over what's being passed during a 10-year optimization phase. So what we're trying to do here is, we have a limited window of opportunity to be able to do the experiments in this facility, with the idea that after those 10 years we found a kind of that perfect suite of technologies or techniques that work for this site, so that we can step away and you have an operational fish passageway that still prevents sea lamprey access, but allows access of native fish at this site that you don't really have now.
Think of that experimental channel. First of all, think of it first. It's below. It is below the sea lamprey barrier, right?
Yep.
So I think in general the community was concerned that the entire site was an experimental facility. Like you were going to experiment with which fish made it up through into the system. The idea is to first construct a barrier, a lamprey barrier that is actually better than the one that's in place. This one has been repaired. There have been some issues over the years. Anyway, so all this experimentation happens below that. Number two is within that channel. Dan talked about this 30-foot wide channel. There's the ability to break it up into two channels, and then you could manage within the channel. So you could influence the slope. Maybe if you change the slope of that channel, then you can change the velocity of the waters to come in. So if you can control the water coming in the top, the amount of water, and then you can also control the slope, there are a lot of experiments that you can run to see which fish make it up under what conditions. And then you can also, there's substrate that you can manipulate the substrate, the roughness of the substrate, and all those other pieces that go into that. So it'll be really interesting to see those questions that lead to different configurations of the experimental channel. Oh, yeah, that's right. And that was Dan there,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. So one of the things we want to do as part of the outreach and education component of this is we're talking about, and it's not shown on here, but we want to have that public interaction with the facility. And one of the thoughts would be, initially one of the thoughts was having like an actual viewing window for people to see, but you won't always have experiments going on, so you may be looking into a dry channel at certain times. But one of the options that we're thinking of is even having an underwater camera, so you could have still that visual component where not only researchers can get a lot of information from seeing what the fish are doing from an underwater perspective, but also then it's an opportunity for people to actually see what's going on in this experimental city in their backyard.
So maybe there's a related kiosk or an informational area that maybe that might be in conjunction with a building that houses the scientists and all their ability to fabricate the pieces that will be incorporated into this design. So somewhere in here there will be some sort of structure that enables the scientists to house their equipment. They'll be able to fabricate pieces for the experiment. Hopefully in conjunction with that there'll be some educational and outreach opportunities for what Dan was talking about, so people could actually understand the process.
You could easily do some distance learning when the YouTube channel is established or whatever media at that point is there.
Oh yeah.
Which is very, very, very easy to do.
Yep. Yeah, and that's I think there's been even discussion about having whatever that feed be going directly to like museums or other aquariums around within the kind of Midwest.
Yeah, Shed's Aquarium
Shed's
actually
Aquarium,
asked about that.
Yep.
It's interesting to have folks from Chicago interested in the project up here to be able to live feed something like that. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yep.
Is there any concern because somebody earlier today, it might have been yourself,
Sorry?
Earlier today, you mentioned the idea of the control of the temperature because it's always the warm water coming over a spillway. Is there any concern as far as thermal conditions that is worked into this and special or unique?
Yeah, that can be an issue at a lot of dam sites because you have a large reservoir where you can have those thermoclines with different levels of water temperature being released downstream. Here, upstream, you only have about 10 feet deep of water, so you don't really have any thermal stratification between the surface water and the bottom. But that's always something, there are engineered solutions where, we can use different type of outlets to be able to change some of the temperature of the outflow.
Is there anything included?
No, not explicitly right now, no.
What kind of flow rates have you got coming through here, like the current right now, and what's the difference going to be?
So right now, I think that the mean summer kind of springtime flow is about right around 300 CFS at this site. And with the new facility, we're matching that. So there's no additional impoundment. We're going to match the capacity of the existing dam to meet, the flood requirements, but also not increase any impoundment upstream and just release the water as it gets to the site. And really our control becomes, where does that water go, whether it goes over that bypass spillway or through the experimental channel. And depending on what the experiment is, may depend on whether you need 20 CFS or 250 of that 300 CFS going through that channel. Yeah, and one of the things that's really cool about this is there's a lot of different environmental cues that determine whether a fish actually will enter a facility like this. And that's one of the cool things that we can start to look at here, because if you go back into the history of fish passage engineering, it's littered with a lot of failures, mainly because we don't think like fish. So you just put an entrance, anywhere along the river. Well, fish is going to go where the most of the flow is going. So like it's set like this, they're going to be bumping up against, where you have culverts coming through the dam, and then eventually making their way over to where this entrance is. So here we have a facility where, if you have even flow coming through the experimental channel or the bypass spillway, and that's one of the things that we're going to look at is, kind of how we can maybe reconfigure that downstream end. But that's one of the things we can look at here is how, can you artificially get these fish to go where they would normally go? And just, that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg in terms of some of the questions we can answer here. Yeah, we have had discussions with some of the researchers about potentially setting this up as a long-term monitoring site, which is an NSF-funded opportunity to be. We're kind of thinking about linking this in with other large experimental migratory fish facilities around the world, because that's kind of one of the goals that NSF has with that kind of grant. So that's one of the opportunities that we're looking into.
That's the goal of the project management team, is try to understand how to fund it, how to produce agreements to understand how it's used, who uses it, the experimental community, the universities, most likely that'll be wanting to come to this, and then how do you choose between them? So we'll have to have a structure and mechanisms in place to understand who gets to use it when, how it gets to be used, how to fund it, and then who takes the responsibility of the maintenance, short-term and long-term. So there's the project management component, even though as the BDI team is those scientists and engineers that are together in a room trying to figure out the puzzle. Well, the project management team has to actually make it work. Design comes in, the rest of the management components those are the things that make or break this kind of project. It'll be really interesting. And we through the first two workshops, I'm amazed at inside of a year where we're at with this right now. So what'll actually come out of this by somewhere around the end of 2018 are a full set of engineered design plans that could be either handed to or create an RFP for someone to actually bid on constructing this project. A lot of folks, we see these pretty drawings and we think that they're feasibility drawings. These drawings were based on data. There was survey data, bathymetric data through the entire channel. It doesn't show up, you don't see topo lines in here. But everything that Dan's been doing has been based on data. So this is certainly a humongous step above feasibility designs, which typically look like this. I just want to make sure that everybody realizes how much Dan has into this. Every one of these are based on many iterations of data analysis.
Yeah, I have a couple things.
Yeah.
So most of these teachers will be coming back up here with their students, and I'm wondering if there's any reason why they should bring their students here, and if they did, if there was anything they could get out of that, like in the fall or the spring, or if they would need to wait for another year.
I'm trying to understand the depth of the question. They'll bring their students up here for what purpose?
For our program, they're coming here to do a schoolship program with Inland Seas.
Okay.
And a lot of them are coming from really far away, right? We've got Chicago and Detroit and Indiana, for example. And they may want to do a little bit longer experience in Traverse City. And so just wondering if this is something that they could bring students to learn about, or...
Basically the same capacity that we're doing right now.
Okay.
Or a different audience, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
There won't be anything actually physically different here for
Okay.
another couple of years. 19 or 20 is when
Okay.
it'll start.
Yep.
But absolutely, as far as the team's concerned, we always have willing members. Dan's driving across the state to meet with you here today. We're here located here.
Great.
So absolutely, if we can help out in any way, because really this is about. I love the part of the movie that we saw last night that Dan kind of leads to. There's a couple pieces where they talk about youth, and that's really where the future is. You know, this kind of work inspiring the next generations of scientists is about the most important thing that we can do. You guys, I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys know all that, but to get folks thinking, that they might be able to be part of a project that is globally significant to figuring out an issue or how to solve that. It's magnificent.
Yeah, and it's something that's been coming up for me during all of this is the number of careers that are connected to this, and probably 90% of those are not careers you would normally think of offering to your students. So I wonder if it would even be a thing that, you know, you brought your kids up here to do our schoolship program, and then maybe we could pull together 3 or 4 people who are part of this, who could talk about their career and their work, and if that feels like it might be inspiring to your kids. Yeah?
Yeah, and I would like to add that coming from the International Fish Passage Conference just last week, a project like what's going on in the Boardman River is incredibly unique. When we talk about, when you see a lot of presentations at that meeting and people talk about, oh, this is, you know, a huge river restoration or dam removal project, they're talking about one site, one dam being removed, one stretch of river being reestablished. The Boardman River is a huge project, and it's very unique for that situation. And to have an opportunity to have kids to come out and actually see, you know, a project at this scale, I think, is really important and a really cool experience, I think, that they could have.
And this lower part, the Union Street piece is modular, so the entire project has always been kind of promoted that whatever we did, we wanted to do it in a very transparent form so that other communities facing the same issues could grab pieces and or all of the process and use it in their community. And this has global implications. So along with those folks from whichever 3 or 4 continents we're talking about, I mean, some of the solutions and experiments that happen here can be used throughout the planet, which is really awesome.
Do any of you have a dam in your community?
Anyone live in a desert? I mean, every community has a dam. Come on, let's do that again. Who doesn't have a dam in their community?
Or doesn't know?
Or a culvert. I mean, anything that's a barrier to fish passage, you're talking dams and culverts.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
a culvert search might be an interesting inventory. Where are the culverts? You know, that could be a job for your students. Just walk around. Yeah.
Think about the way the water moved across your landscape before there were roads, bridges, and or dams, right? So just the flow of water across the landscape, I think across the whole United States, we see a lot of, we talked about it a little bit earlier, about these single thread streams that most likely didn't exist because when the water moved across the landscape, it wasn't focused by every road that's built is essentially a dam. And that dam allows passage through it, through the culverts that Dan's talking about. And then when you move it through culverts in a ditch, now you have a manufactured waterway that is totally different than the way that the water moves across the landscape. I'm not saying that we could ever wind up in a situation where we move back to the way it was. Those days are long gone. But we can certainly think use the knowledge we know about the way water moves across the landscape to have better designs when we move more. The roads are not going to stop getting built. The roads, driveways, people's driveways, just to have that thought process in the minds of engineers to come up with something. Maybe that's not a culvert. Maybe somebody will come up with some honeycomb beehive thing that sits underneath the road that allows water to pass underneath the road without channelizing it, without changing the character of the way the water moves across the landscape. That would be wonderful, and I hope that happens someday.
So this is where the science and engineering practices come in. You know, let's engineer new ways of moving water that more mimics nature. Your students can work on that. Yeah.
Anytime anyone wants to come up and would like any information about the project, bring your students here. Just contact Jeannie and myself, and we will make sure that there's somebody related to the project with your students. It's our job. This is what we're paid to do, especially to inform folks. The more folks you inform about it, the better the project becomes. The more you get people to actually buy in and understand what you're doing and believe in it, that's really when the projects take off.
So I have two more things. Not everyone got to see that movie, but some people are interested. Is there a way to see the
I can send you a link in the password.
Okay.
It's not, we can't really globally release it because
Sure.
it's entered in a couple of film festivals. Yeah. So, but I can send you a link you can click on with the password. Everyone can come on. So I'll do that. You'll move it out?
I will, yep.
Okay.
And then you also said there's some kind of curriculum happening?
So, that documentary was originally, the original plan for that documentary was 4 8 to 12 minute videos with associated lesson plans. Those lesson plans would have maybe some tests and some questions and some critical thinking questions that went along with it. So we'll actually, sounds like we're going to wind up with 8 to 16 of those associated with that documentary. And also, so those are still an editing component. The documentary is complete. So those, I don't know exactly the timeline. I can ask Dan about it, but those will be available through, and I'm not sure if Discover MediaWorks are the folks that actually disseminate that information. They will be available. They're supposed to be issued throughout Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. But I think we have folks here from Indiana, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and such, and I don't see why we couldn't.
Yep.
Ohio.
Those other Great Lakes states?
Yeah, those other states. Right, exactly. So I guess I'll keep you informed.
Yeah, that would be great. And that's perfect for your Earth Force teams around the state, those shorter videos. Yeah. No.
Sorry?
You want to check the Lamprey trap?
I was just, I think, yeah, we can. I see the chains that are there, so they're still here. I asked Brett, our biologist, about it, and we can pull them up, but he said there hasn't been anything in them in a week and a half. But let's look. Let's look. It's fun. Yeah.
Where does the funding come from, was a question.
So the funding for the design phase is funded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. We have funding for, if things stay as originally planned, we'll have funding for the first 3 years to get through the design phase. But construction is an ongoing process of finding funding for the construction phase.
And then are there contingency plans if that passage doesn't prevent things from coming up that you don't want to come up? What kind of things
there's always the fallback of the status quo, which is pretty much everything is stopped here. So that's always the fallback, and that's why we have the experimental channel downstream of the barrier, so that there aren't any of those unintended releases. And we have several measures in place, so it's not just one specific aspect can be a weakness. We have redundancies built in to potentially protect against that.
And if someone wanted just a really quick sentence of what's the purpose of this fish passage? What's in a nutshell?
It is to reconnect the Great Lake tributaries with the Great Lakes and provide selective bidirectional fish passage.
So are you looking to be able to choose any species if you wanted to try and keep any species out for some reason in the future, potentially this could be modified so that the next thing that becomes an invasive species, you already have something in place that
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, for the preparing for the proposal that got funding for this initial phase, Asian carp were listed as one potential concern, and that's where I have expertise coming from working with Asian carp. It may not necessarily be an issue for the boardman, but it's certainly something that can be applied at other sites to start tackling those issues.
Well, that's really interesting you brought up Asian carp, because we've got people watching in Canada right now that were asking that question earlier, because they apparently have a big problem up in Ontario with
grass carp, probably
with some invasive species there. And some of those questions were from a lady over in New Zealand who's watching right now.
Oh, so, common carp, yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that. Let's go and see what they've got in the lamprey chaps.
All right.
So I hope that answers. If there's any more questions out there, feel free to bang them into the comments right now. We're going to go and check these sea lamprey traps, and I'll show you the fish passage as it is now. So as you guys can see, this is right downtown, so it's very, very different from the other sites, and it's pretty incredible, pretty incredible project to be watching and learning about.
Well, I'm stationed at Hampton Bay Biological Station.
So what we're going to walk down alongside right now is the actual. This prevents the sea lamprey getting up because they can't jump. So what you're going to see here is like a fish staircase. So the jumping fish can actually come up here. However, the sea lamprey don't have the ability to get up the staircase. Where we are right now is downtown Traverse City, and they've just got the trap up, so I'll show you what the
fin clip them, and then they release a certain number downstream, and then they calculate how many recaps they get compared with how many uncaptured ones, and it gives them a population estimate. I used to work for the tribe, and this was one of my deals, was to check these.
So what you got in here today?
Rustic cavefish and some
Bluegills.
Some bluegills.
Rusty crayfish, which are not good. Those aren't invasive.
You know, if you put them in some like Cajun seasoning and you boil them in water, they're not bad. They don't get that. They don't get that.
To do that with a fishing license. Well, for these guys, I don't think we need.
You don't need one.
No, they're
Fine.
invasive.
I just read it.
Yeah.
You can tell a rusty because it looks like you picked one up by the carapace with ink on your fingers. They have a spot on each side.
They're from fishing.
They were imported from the lower Midwest, like Missouri, for bait.
So we'll go ahead and end this now, but yeah, we can canoe right down in the river here. If you look earlier, you'll see it's coming down the Ottoway in canoes, and then all of this will be up onto YouTube. So do go ahead and make sure you've liked the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to follow this whole process as they remove the other dam, the Sabin Dam, and continue to de-water at the Boardman River Dam, which we were at earlier with the Army Corps of Engineers. So thanks for joining, guys. Have a